As sports history fans, we often reminisce about the legends. Willis Reed limping onto the NBA Finals court, Kurt Schilling's bloody sock, Kerry Strug's courageous dismount, and so many more. These moments often define sports history. But what about the countless injuries that did not become legends, or careers that were derailed due to inadequate care? That's where this episode's sponsor comes in. Introducing to you, ILP Sports Consultants, your trusted sports injury partner, available 24/7. Brian Maelli at ILP Sports Consultants has over 20 years of experience in the orthopedic and sports medicine industry, and he has worked with athletes across the gamut, from youth to amateurs, professionals, in almost every sport played in the United States of America, accommodating athletes at every stage of their career. This adaptability ensures that ILP services are perfectly tailored to your skill level, no matter where you are in your athletic journey. With ILP, you are in control. Choose the steps that matter most to you. Diagnosis, treatment plan, recovery, or the whole journey. ILP services are tailored to your unique needs. Rushing for care is a common pitfall, leading to future problems. ILP Sports Consultants helps you make the right decisions, ensuring that you receive timely and safe care. And here's a bonus. Brian hosts the Injured List podcast, sharing insights and athlete stories you won't want to miss. Whether you're a concerned parent or grandparent, or an athlete yourself seeking guidance, ILP Sports Consultants is your beacon of hope in sports injury management. Visit ilpsports.com today. That's the letters ilpsports.com. ILP Sports Consultants, where your well-being is the priority and your recovery is the mission. Choose ILP Sports Consultants for a healthier sports journey, helping you get back in the game the smart way.
Blog Talk Radio.
Tonight we'll go back in time to seasons past, when 22 men graced the rugged fields of yesterday, fighting for one more first down, one more yard gain, one final score which would bring victory after 60 minutes of battle on the gridiron. Tonight we'll explore the world of Gridiron Greats. Welcome to Gridiron Greats Football History and its Memorabilia on the Gridiron Greats Publisher and Broadcasting Network, in conjunction with Swick Enterprises. We're live from the Wallingford, Connecticut home of Gridiron Greats Magazine, and I'm Bob Swick, publisher and editor of Gridiron Greats Magazine, and I'll be your host for the show. Gridiron Greats is the only publication in America which focuses upon the history and memorabilia of the North American football game since its inception in 1869. We cover 150-plus years of football history and memorabilia. You can find us on the web at gridirongreatsmagazine.com. And it's at this time I'd like to introduce my guest co-host. He's a senior contributing writer to Gridiron Greats Magazine, a football memorabilia historian, specializing in the early artifacts of the game. He also has what I believe is one of the most incredible runs of football card sets from the 1894 Mayos right through the 1980s. And he hails from Virginia. I'd like to welcome a good friend of Gridiron Greats, Mr. Jeff Payne. Jeff, welcome to the show this evening.
Hey, Bob. How you doing? Happy to be here.
Thank you for filling in. Joe had some unexpected business, and I'm going to lead off with one of the bigger stories of the day, one of the few stories that is active right now in sports. and a fellow you know quite well from a team that you are a big fan of, Mr. Tom Brady. What's going on with Mr. Brady?
Mr. Brady, wow. Yeah, so as you mentioned, I'm almost a lifelong Patriots fan. I guess that's my only excuse, right? It's been almost 45 years I've been rooting for this crazy team. I really didn't think this day would ever come, Bob. I really, really thought in the end that Brady was going to be one of the few GOATs that would play his entire career with one team. And I thought Kraft and Belichick and Brady, they would just get together and they would figure out how to make it work. But they didn't. So I guess now he's a Buck, right?
I personally was shocked when I heard the news, and I tried talking to a few of my contacts in the Tampa area about it. And I think it's a two-folded, for lack of a better term, a two-folded move that I think will benefit Brady and obviously will benefit the Tampa Bay Bucks to a large degree. And Brady is in relatively good shape for his age, but I'm not overly, I don't know, is he going to have the targets he needs to be Tom Brady, the real Tom Brady, when he's on the Bucks? That's going to be the big question.
That will be the big question. Different system, obviously. Great receivers down there. I know their line is suspect and their defense net has never been good. I know they're trying to shore it up. But, if Jameis Winston can throw for 5,000 yards, Tom Brady can throw for 5,000 yards in Tampa Bay.
Right.
So,
right.
He's going to put up some numbers. There's no doubt about that. From a football card collecting perspective, it's going to be really bizarre to see him, a football card in a Bucs uniform for Tom Brady. I'm guessing there's some already out, with how fast they move on some of those things. But, I was thinking about the other great players. I know it's just so shocking to see the cards with like Montana as a Chief or, Jerry Rice as, either a Raider or a Seahawk, Unitas as a Charger, Namath as a Ram. Who can forget OJ too? Simpson in an orange jumpsuit. That's the best one, right?
Yep.
49er uniform, of course. And a 49er uniform. But I just can't wrap my head around it. The first time I see one of those cards of Tom Brady, it's just going to really, really kind of hurt a little bit,
Talking about classic players from years gone by, what happened to Unitas with the Colts? Well, they ungraciously basically told him to get out of there. And Johnny Youth really thought he could still play, even though he was really running out of gas at the end of his career. The only team that offered him a position were the Chargers. And at that time, with the drug culture and everything like that, here's a clean-cut, crew-cut guy coming to a team that's basically sandals and the beach type of thing. And it was a rough move for him. And I know he was very unhappy and he didn't do well. And that was it, one and done type of thing.
Yeah.
Namath to the Rams, to me, was a little more interesting because Namath had the movie, TV influence of California. So that seemed a little more logical, to go out there. Not that he had any success out there because, he really didn't have much success the second half of his career, being injured all the time. But, it's tough to watch. But then again, I look at a Montana going from the 49ers to the Chiefs. And conversely, I also, you look at Emmitt Smith when he ended up in Arizona for that year. It's sad, and I also understand, you're not gonna, you don't want to give the game up. That's what it all comes down to. It really is.
Yep.
In Brady's case, though, I'm kind of shocked because he's always going to be a Patriot in my eyes. Now unless he somehow wins the Super Bowl with the Bucks and he proves everybody wrong, type of thing.
No, I would agree. I just can't fathom. And I know I guess in 2021 the Bucks are coming to Foxborough to play, which that's going to be a major show. When he comes back, he's going to get a great reception, you know.
That's compared to the
he'll get a great reception, but, you know, it's going to be a show.
Yeah, it's going to be very, very interesting to say the least. Mm-hmm. All right, so we'll be following that story throughout the year, I'm sure. We'll be talking about it on the show and every place else. So it'll be very interesting to see what really ends up happening one way or the other. The second topic we're going to talk about, which is a topic I'm sure everybody's tired of hearing about, but obviously we're in a very serious health care crisis with the COVID-19 coronavirus in our country. A lot of people's lives have changed dramatically over the past few weeks. Our friends in Italy are really taking a bad hit over there with many, many people dying as compared to the United States. But we still need to talk about, and for our listeners, and several people have asked me, what's going on with shows today, and how's it impacting the auction market at the same time from the COVID-19 virus? What are your thoughts on that, Jeff?
Well, shows are being decimated, obviously, at this point. I know there were some small shows that happened in February and early March, but all the big dogs were coming up, right? Like Chantilly and Chicago and Strongsville and a lot of other ones that they were trying to run them. They were keeping hope alive. But then when everybody started to social distance and all these decrees came out about the number of people that should be congregating in the same place, it was pretty clear they were going to get whacked. So, they're decimated, and it's not going to come back until people start gathering again, really, unfortunately.
Yeah.
The auctions, at first blush, you might say, well, they're virtual, so people are at home and, people should still be bidding on stuff. But I think, as you know, because of the side effect of all this, the economic impact that we're seeing, which is pretty dramatic, I think people are pulling back. People are not spending money. I think that's going to continue until this whole thing gets cleared out, and could go a lot longer if the economy doesn't rebound.
Right. I think there's two major factors going on in the marketplace. Obviously, the gathering now here in Connecticut, and I don't know. I know basically the tri-state area is trying to shut down. Obviously, New York City, because of the amount of people there and the very, very close living spaces, there's going to be more issues with the virus spreading much more quickly. So I believe the tri-state area is going to be definitely impacted. I live in Connecticut. Fortunately, I live in a very rural town. I got plenty of space between my neighbors, yada, yada, yada. But, somebody who lives in a, 400-person apartment building, it's a little too close for comfort type of thing.
Yeah. So
getting back to the concept of a show, well, it's not really going to be, comfortable setting up next to somebody and to have, 5 people at your table all elbow to elbow going through, picking through cards and whatever. I know the shows here in Connecticut are basically canceled until further notice. And we have more coin shows than we actually do card shows. But in any event, everything is shut down. My big question, and I had a good friend of mine ask me, well, what do you really think is going to happen with the National? Well, I know they're going to do whatever they humanly can to make sure that show goes on, because they have a lot invested in it. But I'm saying to myself, even in July, it could be too soon to have big gatherings like that as far as an inside venue as compared to baseball games occurring, so on and so forth. I mean, I could be completely off with my thoughts on it. But at the same time, too, I got a strong feeling some dealers and some people who would normally go to the show are going to say, hey, I'm passing. I'll see you in 2021 type of thing. So I could see that happening at the same time also. And, that's going to impact that show. And, again, it's in Atlantic City, and that's a very, tight-quartered area there, no matter where you stay. You're basically one on top of one another. So it should be interesting to see what happens. I offer no thoughts one way or the other whether the show will be on or not, because I have a feeling it's going to take a little while for everything to really get back to normal. I'm saying to myself, hopefully everything will reopen by the middle of April, and then, hopefully things will get back to normal at the beginning of May or so, and we should be all right then in July. You know what I mean? But anything, I could be completely wrong. Who knows? So that's really impacting the market.
It is. I'm getting less and less optimistic about the National, unfortunately. I've been watching it really carefully because part of my business, we have some events that we run, some pretty sizable events, software-related, shows and exhibits. And obviously this spring is a disaster in that regard.
Yeah.
But I'm kind of watching just because we have shows in the fall, and hopeful obviously that this is not still a problem in the fall, but we don't know, right? As this drags out, and as you look at kind of the continuing escalation of infections, you just kind of start to wonder, well, where is it going to peak and come back down, and how far out is that? We don't know.
Yeah.
That's the reality. We don't know. And so it's really hard to predict, but the longer that every day they go up, the closer and closer we get to scenarios where, you could see the National just not happening. The other thing that you factor into this, which is what we were factoring into our show decision, was, what the relationship is with the host facility, right? And what your financial commitment is, because you don't just show up there one day and just all agree you're going to split money. I mean, they've committed to Atlantic City and that facility years in advance, and I guarantee you they have very steep penalties for pulling out, and that really puts them in a tough spot.
Well, I think given the circumstances of the crisis, I truly believe, at least I hopefully believe, that many of these businesses and many of these venues are saying to themselves, listen, we have a national crisis. We're going to waive, everything but a X amount of dollar fee for our paperwork on or whatever, and that's it. You know what I mean? I can't really see, and although, people agree and they disagree with what I'm saying, that I can't really see the finances playing a role in it if, we're at a point where government says, okay, you can't meet, so there's nothing you can do about it. You know what I mean? And hopefully everybody's smart enough to have enough insurance on their events and festivals and whatever else they're doing, so that you have some recourse in it. And I really believe that's going to play a role in what's going on with regards to the whether or not it'll happen or not. Two things got to happen with the virus, and I hate talking about non-football stuff, but I got to throw this out. I really believe once it peaks and it starts to go down, there'll be a lot more optimism in our society. And with so many different companies working on a possible vaccine, if something comes out, and even if it gives a 50 or 60% chance of curing it or survival, whatever it may be, there'll be a lot more optimism too at the same time. I think we're fortunate in our country, obviously, because we have a very good healthcare system, and I'm confident, being the optimist I am, I'm confident that it'll come to a resolution pretty quickly. Hopefully by the middle of April, one way or the other. So, and again, there's still a lot of online auctions. There's still eBay. There's still a lot of different smaller sites selling stuff. However, I just don't see a lot of enthusiasm, and I do agree with you 100%. The individual's finances have been impacted in the hobby, and a lot of people are going to say, "Hey, I got to make a decision, and I'm not going to spend $1,000 on this piece of memorabilia or whatever. I got to worry about, the mortgage, bills, whatever the case may be." So could be some massive buying opportunities in the market upcoming very, very quickly. And
I think there could be. I think there could be because this is such a surprise, right? It came out of nowhere that, I think it did surprise a lot of people. The economy was so strong, and then overnight almost it just stopped. And I think you're right. It's going to throw some people for a loop, and there's going to be people that panic and sell stuff, just like we saw really and the financial crisis was not as dramatic in terms of a day, right? But even then was a lot of people scrambling to sell memorabilia and collectibles that they felt they just needed the money instead. I agree we'll see some of that in the coming months.
Yeah, I have a very strong feeling that's going to be a very, very prevalent part of the hobby, unfortunately, in the near future. All right, let's get off this gloom and doom and let's talk about some fun stuff.
Yeah, really.
And I know you've picked up an enormous amount of stuff since the last time we talked on the air, and I'm going to hand off to you, and let's start talking about a few things. The first thing, though, I like to talk about, I'll skip around a little here, are some trade cards that you picked up from the late the early 1890s. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah. So, Al Olson, obviously. He wrote a great article for Gridiron Greats magazine on some, 1890 trade cards he picked up that were, that depicted the game between Yale and Princeton that year, an iconic game in 1890. And, for those that don't know, trade cards are, they were kind of like business cards in the late 1800s, early 1900s. Printers would print them. They would have usually very colorful graphics on them, sometimes caricatures, paint, almost, art, little artwork cards. But then they would sell them to businesses that would have them put advertisements on them, on the front, on the back, their address, some stuff about their products. And these companies would give these out almost like business cards to their patrons and to their prospects and partners and things like that. And it was a really popular thing in that era. And, fortunately, there's some fantastic football trade cards. We could spend a whole episode talking about trade cards from that era. But these trade cards that Al discovered were, caricatures of players, so kind of cartoonish figures, but underneath it was some text that had been added by the printer, obviously for an organization that had wanted these for their business and or their maybe college. There's some speculation it was done by Yale or Princeton or both, and they depicted this game. Well, a couple weeks, I always thought they were fantastic. When I saw them in his article, I just couldn't believe. I'd never seen them before, other than there was a mention of them and a couple that was in a blog called Football of Yore, which I know you know.
Yep.
Yep. They had a few of them, and they had written up a blog on it, I'd say 6 or 7 years ago now. And I had seen that and just thought these things were fantastic. But I'd never seen one come up at auction. 3-4 weeks ago on eBay, I'm just doing my usual daily search, right? Drinking my coffee early morning, doing a little searching, and I just, right? When you've looked at stuff long enough and you see something, you just know what it is. And I just did a double take because there was one of these cards. And I was like, holy cow, there's one of these on eBay. The interesting thing about it, though, was the text on it was different. It was not the same text on Al's cards and the Football of Yore cards. It was actually a reference to Harvard instead of Yale or Princeton. I was like, well, that's interesting. So maybe somebody did this for one of the other games that, that season. And so, I sniped it, as I like to do, and won it. I was really excited and waiting for it to show up. And right after it closed, the same seller posted 4 or 3 more different images with different text, all associated with Harvard or Yale, as far as I could tell. So now it was starting to look like, oh, well, this is the Harvard-Yale game that was played. It was actually played right before the Yale-Princeton game. And in a pretty big upset, Harvard won that game and ended up, winning the national championship. They finished undefeated. And so I was like, well, I got to get these too. And so I, sniped those and was fortunate enough to win those as well. And ended up with all 4 of them, which is really cool. I need to do a lot more research. Some of them are cryptic. One of them, one of them's pretty clear. It's Bob McClung, who was one of the, the captain and star of the Yale team that year. And one of Al's cards references McClung as well. This is a different image than the one Al has that mentions McClung on it. He was the U.S. Secretary of Treasury ultimately later in life. But the other ones are a little cryptic, kind of like Al's were. And I've been digging into it, just reading old newspapers and articles to see what happened in that game, to see if I can piece together, what players or play is being referenced on these, referencing something, just like Al's were. So I'm still working on that. When I get through it, I'll write you a good article for Gridiron Greats and share it with everybody.
Well,
they're really cool.
My theory now, after you found those, and I always kept it in the back of my mind, and I kind of mentioned it to Al too. I'm wondering if they did for every game that season for Yale, they did maybe 3 or 4 promotional postcards for the businesses in that area or whatever. I really don't know. I mean, that's one theory I throw out, if it's possible, type of thing. And because they,
I can see that.
There's basically been 3 finds of it: Football of Yore, and then Al's, and now yours. And that's kind of amazing after how many, 130 years. Now we're actually seeing a few that came to the market. It's just truly amazing to me. Truly amazing. And again, anybody who reads Gridiron Greats on a regular basis, I did get a lot of comments on Al's article because, that nobody really ever saw anything like that. And to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm not overly big in baseball, there were several baseball types of those cards that were issued over the years with the players in different positions or whatever. Not so much for college, but for the beginning, either the minor league teams or a handful of the major league teams. I don't know how true that is either. You know what I mean? So it could, since those were the 2 basic sports at the time, baseball being more prevalent, I'm sure there's a lot of those types of trade cards around. Football, few and far between, rare beyond rare as far as cards were concerned. You know what I mean? So I'll be interested to see what kind of research you come up with it, because it's an amazing story to see these actual pieces actually come to the market. I mean, it's truly fascinating to me.
Yeah, no, me too. And I'm so excited. They're so beautiful too. I mean, their color, in that era, that's a big thing. And they're lithographic, so they're just little works of art. And I did look at someone that we know mentioned that perhaps printer was Tobin, that apparently did quite a bit of kind of cartoonish caricature types of sports images on trade cards back in that era. I did look into that a little bit, and found some references to that company's work and his work. He was an artist who owned this printing shop. It could be his, but it's not clear. The baseball ones, they're pretty prevalent. If you go out to eBay, I went out to eBay and I did I typed trade card Tobin, and up popped, a bunch of them. Almost every one though, he signed in the bottom, kind of like an artist would, right, in his artwork. That's not on these football ones. So They may not be, from his printing shop. We don't know.
Mm-hmm.
It's and I agree with you. I actually think that someone created a cartoon, small set of trade cards for football, and then marketed them to advertisers and the schools and or the colleges in the area, and tried to get them to buy them and put advertisements on them.
Right.
It would be interesting if another game comes up. But of course, as you know, Yale, Harvard, Princeton, right? They were the three big dogs. So, and I don't think Princeton. I think I looked it up, and Harvard played in 1890. So, if you're thinking the big three, the YHPs back then, there's a case to be made. Maybe it was only these two games because they were the big games, right back then.
Right. But again, and to follow logically, the Mayos were what? Yale, Princeton, Harvard. So that's pretty interesting there too. So now you have almost a segue into the Mayos a few years later from these types of trade cards. So it's kind of fascinating to see the connection there of what's going on with those trade cards and how what possibly could be an addendum to, or a beginning to real cards with the Mayos. So it's very interesting to me. Great find. You also were working on, and I couldn't believe when I started hearing all the stories about some Patchville Maroon set that you knocked off there. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so you and Joe talked about the Hunt Super Bowl auction that was happening, at Super Bowl weekend. And one of the pieces you all talked about was this, framed piece that had a complete set of the 1926 Pottsville Maroons postcards on it, all mounted and all autographed. And I've been working on that set for a long time. And, and it was really, there's certain sets in the hobby that you just figure you'll never finish because the population of the cards is just so small that your likelihood of finding them all is just minuscule unless you get really lucky. And I've gotten really lucky with some of the Pottsville Maroons. I missed out on a lot that came up in Leland's in 2012. A set of them, or a lot of them came up, 15 of the 18 came up in Leland's. I didn't even really know exactly what they were. I was just getting into pre-war at that point. I saw them. They were interesting. I did bid on them, but I got blown out of the water. But quickly figured out what they were, and I was like, gosh dang it, I should have tried harder to get them. So I've been looking for them ever since. And fortunately have run into a few collectors who have also been looking for these and have dealt with them through the years or even through the decades, and were willing to part with some. And I was able to get to the point where I had 15 of the 18 that were out there. The three big ones are the three hardest ones to get in the set are the Charlie Berry, the Tony Latone, and Barney Wentz. They were all pros in that time frame for the Maroons, and they're all star players in their own right. And they're hard to find. The lot that came up in Leland's 8 years ago did not have those three cards in it. Another lot that sold privately, and I was able to nudge some of those cards out of the person that bought those, did not have those cards in the lot as well. And so, it was really getting to the point where you're starting to wonder, well, where are these cards? Do they exist or whatnot? Now I'd heard, well, the Tony Latone had come up in the Leland slot. I knew there was a Latone card. The people who sold one of the lots that I was able to get some cards from had the Wentz. They kept the Wentz. No one had seen the Charlie Berry at auction, as far as I could tell. And there were even people, a decade ago who I heard were questioning whether that card even existed. But then, someone stepped forward and said, no, I've seen that card. It does exist. So long story short, myself and two collectors went together and purchased the Hunt Super Bowl auction, maroon set. And I just kept the three that I needed. And, the other guys split the rest. So I was able to finish the set, which I'm pretty excited about.
For people who don't know, that's like how many cards are in it again, and just a little more background on it.
The Maroons are known for their stolen championship, as they call it, in 1925, the year before. A lot of these players were on that team. Barry and Latone and Wentz were on that team, as well as a lot of other players in this set. The next year, they had a team that many would argue was even better. They still hold, although the NFL doesn't. They never give credit to the people. Teams back then. They still hold the record for the most shutouts in a season in NFL history, and it will never be broken. I think it's 11 or something like that. I mean, this team was dominant. They just had a couple of mishaps, and they lost a couple of games, and they ended up not winning the championship in 26. But this set, it's 18 players that were on the team, and they're all professionals. It is widely considered, it's certainly the first all NFL set that was produced, right, ever in history. Right. Some would argue it's the first set of all professional players that was produced. Now, there's a couple of town team, pro teams in the teams that created sets. You could argue, were they really professionals, fully professionals? Were they semi-pros? Whatever, right? Certainly, once the NFL started, this is the first set of all NFL players that was ever produced. But the question really is, when were they produced, and why are there so few of them? Right? Initially, my thought process was that these were probably cards that the team created, and they gave sets to all the players, and then others in the community. But the population is so low. I mean, I know of no card with a population over 4. A total population over 4. Where were these distributed? Where were they produced? What happened to them if they were? And why does every lot that come up, why is it either a almost complete set or a complete set? Right? It's kind of like Packers, Walker, Cleaners, right? You don't see singles ever. You only see sets. And so it makes you wonder how these were distributed and why more of them haven't trickled out.
Right. I'm wondering if they were handed out as a gift, like to an awards dinner of some sort in town, maybe sponsored by the local VFW or something like that, and they were given, like you're saying, to the players, and or they were just given, they just maybe printed up 50 of each, and guys took their own cards or whatever. I really don't know. It's a fascinating subject to research and to look at. I know you're basically the expert on it as far as I'm concerned in your research in it. So I still really wonder, like you're saying, why are certain cards never found? Why are other cards, in theory more common, even though there's only 4 of them? You know what I mean? So it's an amazing.
It is an amazing story. My bet is, number one is, first of all, I thought maybe they were given out at a banquet too, or maybe like right after the season. Interesting thing about the 26th season is, if you recall, at the end of that year, the team didn't have enough money to pay its players. In fact, they almost didn't finish the season. If you read the newspaper articles, when they got to, I'm going to say around mid-November or so, or maybe a little later than that, they weren't being paid any longer. And they actually had a team meeting and had to decide, are we going to finish the season out knowing that we may not get paid, right? Or are we just going to, give it up? Well, they were in
Right.
competition for the championship. They decided that they would play, and the town rallied to try to close the gap. It's unclear. There's kind of conflicting newspaper articles about whether they did or did not ultimately get all their money. But because of that, I think one thing that was interesting was they played a game on Saturday, and Sunday everybody left town. Like, they were all on trains going home, wherever home was. There was no banquet at the end of that year. There was nothing like I expected, because I was looking for that exact event, hoping that they would mention that they gave out these cards, as part of a thank you to the players or something. There's nothing. They did not do that in 26. Players weren't happy. The team wasn't happy. They just dispersed immediately, according to the newspaper. And I did a search looking for these cards, in the Pottsville newspapers all the way up through, I think it was 1949, which if you look at the stamp on the back, the stamp box on the back of the postcards, it tells you, what years the cards had to have been produced, because certain stamp boxes were only valid and legitimate in certain years. And 49 was the last year that the stamp box that's used on these cards, was allowed to be used on a postcard. And the first year was 24. So it had to have been somewhere between 24 and 49. Obviously, it wasn't before 26. There's also speculation that maybe they were printed over time, but we just don't know how, right? Because one of the cards, one of the collectors has one of the cards that doesn't have a print spot on it, where the other two examples do. And just doing some research and talking to collectors, those kind of things often happen when you do a first print and then a negative sits, and then it degrades because it wasn't properly cleaned when it was emulsified, and that leaves a print spot when you print later, right? But nobody knows what later means, right? Was this like, a month later? Was this a year later? Was it a decade later? Nobody knows.
Yeah,
That's a big
exactly.
mystery.
I mean,
it's a mystery.
Yeah. I just think that set is just so interesting because it has so many different unknown variables to it, and to basically have the complete set is just truly it's an amazing set to own. Phenomenal, just phenomenal, and you got to be congratulated on that, because that's an amazing pickup, to say the least. What else, if anything else, do you have? I know you picked up a few other things also.
Yeah, no, I've picked up. I'm a busy little hobbyist like you. Always looking for things I'm missing or upgrades. You mentioned my run of cards. One of the things that I've been working on is I went back through, all of the cards in the run from 1888 to 1989, and just tried to look for cards that I kind of like to upgrade. And I came up with, of course, a huge list. And so this is kind of my side project, is when I'm bored at a card show or, can't really, I look around, I don't really find anything that I'm not interested in, I'll switch gears and start digging through boxes or binders, or I love doing that stuff, right? I mean, it's so much fun to do that at card shows. Just looking for upgrades for my list. I keep my list with me, and I'm looking for upgrades just to try to get every set to where I want it to get to. All right, they're all raw for the most part, except for the pre-war stuff, which you can't really get raw. But and they're not high grade. I'm not trying to do high grade. I just want good, nice, clean looking, respectable kind of cards, and I do have a lot that aren't. So that's something I've been definitely working on. Over time, this while I was until all the shows closed down. Yeah, wow. Those were those were biggies for me.
So when you talk about upgrades, I always think back to my 48 and 49 Leaf sets, which are I have some incredibly horrific cards in the set.
Me too.
And I have some relatively nice cards, roughly X grade. I really don't have anything near mint in any 48 and 49 set. I have cards that have creases. I have cards that have writing on them. I have cards that are, what are the traditionally were called beaters, meaning that they've seen better days. And I always said to myself, and again, with all the conflict of trimming in 48 and 49 leaves, I just said the way they are, and that's where they're going to stay. And sure, I would like to have nicer cards in there, but you know what? I in no way, shape, or form going to spend any money trying to find stuff and then find out later on the cards have been altered, trimmed, or whatever the case may be. But
I'm in the same boat on
your
those.
Your collection with the cards you got there. I mean, the conditions are just incredible. I just thoroughly enjoyed looking at them the time I got to see them. They were great. All right,
that's one area that my Leafs are not good either. I'm scared to upgrade them too, right? I mean, when I started, it was kind of when the housing crunch hit, 10 years ago or so. And originally, I was just going to kind of work on the run by branching out from my childhood sets from the 70s, which I had most of completed when I was a kid. My idea was I was going to kind of work backwards, and then I'd work up toward 89, which was going to be pretty easy. But with the housing crunch, the card prices had dropped so dramatically from 2005, 2006, which was before I was collecting, that I made this kind of a spot decision that, boy, I better go get the oldest ones first, because they're the ones that when they start to appreciate, when we come out of this housing issue, I might not be able to afford them if I don't get them now, right? And so I ran out and I grabbed every, butt ugly leaf I could find that I needed. I didn't care about condition. I just wanted a copy, right? And I did the same for Chickles, and I did the same. Initially, I started for Mayos, but then I ran into a guy who had 10 graded ones that he wanted to sell. They were all like SGC 50s or something. I was like, wow. Well, if I get those, then I'm not going to want these other ones. And so the Mayo ended up switching pretty quick to kind of mid-grade, but I never got around to the Leafs and the early Bowman upgrades, and they're the ones that, now I'm scared to touch.
Yeah. I agree with you. I mean, I always said I got one of each copy of the card in the sets. I know some of those cards are bad, and they're just going to stay that way, and that's it. And I was never concerned upgrading basically 57 and back. Right, that was my cutoff. 58 up, I always try to do the best I could as far as what I could with what I could afford, what I could trade for, and so on and so forth. But it's truly amazing to see nicer condition cards, especially when they're older and they're raw. But then now everybody has the red flag go off, the red light go off to see, well, are they trimmed, are they touched up, so on and so forth. It's amazing. Let's talk a few minutes on, because we're down about almost 12 minutes left, about a organization that you started and that I'm a member of, and it's called VFC, and I start off my mornings with it. And give us some background on it.
So Vintage Football Community, VFC. I've been doodling on this for a long time. The thing that always drove me crazy when I got back into the hobby, in, really, 10, 11 years ago or so, plus or minus, was that all the message boards were baseball message boards, right? And I love baseball. I still have 20,000 cards from as a kid. But it was never my passion. It was never, I collected them because I was a collector. I collected everything, right? I was one of those kids. I still have them all, but I just never, when I got back into the hobby, football was always my first love. It was the cards I loved the most. And when I got back into it with my kids, I was like, well, I'm going to do that. I'm going to start with the ones I love. I'll start with football. And then once I got into it, I was like, well, I'm never leaving football. This is it. So I never got back into baseball. I like baseball as a sport, though. But you know, you go to the message boards, and they're all baseball boards, right? They're football's this little tiny, you know, one category or one line, and I get it, right? These boards were started by baseball collectors, and you know, it's about baseball. Baseball's a huge piece of the hobby, way larger than football is, as we know. But the football forums never got any real volume, right? I mean, I tried to pump a couple of them up a few times and really start posting a lot. And for a while that would work pretty good. And then everybody would kind of like sort of lose interest in you know, the baseball collectors who were kind of typing in would eventually just decide, I'll just, you know, stop reading this football stuff and go back to baseball. And so I always felt football needed a home. The way I described it, right, is a place where it was all about football. The biggest problem I had with it was I couldn't figure out how to make that work. I was afraid that if we started something that was football only, there wouldn't be enough people who wanted to talk football to keep it going, right? Because if it's not active and vibrant, it's no fun, right? It's just not that interesting. And I didn't want to carry it. I didn't want to be the person that like posted it all and nobody else was helping. And it took me a long time kind of mulling over models and how would you make that work and whatnot. And then about 19 months ago, decided to just, I was like, you know what? I got an idea about how this would work. I'm just going to start something. I'm going to see who shows up. And so, you know, I set up a board, gave it a name, and started calling people like you and saying, hey, I'm starting this football thing. I need your help. Because if we don't all, like, pitch in, you know, and share and post and talk, then it's just going to die. It's going to die. It's not going to be, you know, an organic, breathing, living thing, which is what you really want a forum to be. And so to make that happen, I did something which was not very popular with some of the people that I talked to, which was I made a posting requirement. I mean, it's not a hard requirement, though. It's really just, you know, post one football-related thing, a card, something every month, right? You know, and I tell people that push back on that, I'm like, well, we're talking like 10 minutes a month, right? Literally, it should take you no more than that to go search and look for a topic you like, see something and go, oh, I have one of those cards, or I know something about this, or, you know, or, hey, I read this hobby thing and I'll post it over here, right? Because as long as it's about the hobby, I don't really care what the content is. But my feeling is that it wasn't big enough that we could afford to have, you know, just a small handful of people carrying the load. Right. And so, and so I set it up, and you know, as you know, the rule is that every month you're supposed to post something, and we do use our own names, because the other thing is a lot of the boards, as you know, out there, there's a lot of people that like to pick on each other and, you know, just call each other names, and it's just so, I don't know, it's disgusting. I don't like it.
Well, you didn't want the rhetoric to you know, spill over, because, you know, we know quite well other boards we've been on, you know, you don't even go on them anymore because you don't even want to even see what's going on. So.
No, it's ridiculous. And one way you stop that, and this was one of my other rules, was we're not going to be anonymous. Everybody's going to use their real name. So if you want to, you know, be an a-hole, everybody's going to know you're an a-hole. And my bet was, you know, that would radically decrease. Nobody's going to have keyboard courage because they're anonymous, like on some of these other boards where nobody knows who they are, and they can just act like an a-hole and get away with it, right?
Yeah.
So we had another rule is you got to use your real name. It's a private board, so nobody can see it. You have to log in, and it's got a forum password, and so there's no privacy issues or anything like that to it. So long story short, 19 months later, you know, we have about 100 members. We're looking for more. I mean, anybody that loves football, this is your home, man. We talk football like crazy. We usually get 45,000 to 50,000 page views a month. We get 75 to 100 new threads started every month. I did math once. I went back and looked at some of the other boards that have a football forum, and literally we start as many new threads a year as most of them start in 5 or 10 years. You know, that's the kind of, you know, community that it's become, which is exactly what we want, right? And also, of course, you know, the philosophy is this isn't about the cards. This is about the people, the relationship. This is about helping each other, right? We share things. People send each other stuff. There's active trades that go on. People just random acts of kindness, send each other stuff, deals. You know, it's just a place where the true football collector can just enjoy the hobby, you know? And that's what I love about it. And so, you know, anybody out there that's interested, track me down. We're looking for people.
Yeah, definitely.
What's your thought on it?
Contact me. I'll get you in contact with Jeff, and we'll take it from there because it's a great board. I thoroughly enjoy it. I personally have learned so much stuff on it. It's just amazing. And I'll tell you, in times like this, it's a nice break for me. And I do go on it quite frequently, even though I don't have 100 posts a day. I know I probably have 2 or 3 or whatever. But to read what's on it is just amazing. It's just a wealth of knowledge as far as oddball sets, football facts, you name it. It's just a great website, great board to be on. And I'm very honored, and I truly appreciate all the effort and the work you did on to make it happen, Jeff, because it's the yeoman work, to say the least. And fortunately, I know you know a lot of the technical stuff with computers, which has passed me by in this lifetime. That's all I can say. So
labor of love. It's a labor of love for me. I love it, you know. And I tried really hard to make it really easy for people to be able to post and put pictures on, because that's the other thing that drives me nuts about some of the other boards is it is so hard to actually post something. It's like, we can't have that. There's got to be a better way, you know?
Yeah, yours is very easy, and even a beginner like me can take a few pictures with my phone, and I know how to upload them, and I can get them on, and so on and so forth. I just had a few problems getting them the right way. I couldn't get them to turn, and then I figured that out. So after that was fine. We're down to about 4 minutes, so we're going to go into our 2-minute warm and wrap up and warning. One last question before we wrap things up. Once again, any advice to someone starting out in the football card or football memorabilia hobby?
Yeah, I'm going to take a different cut at this. I knew you were going to ask me this, and you know, I always feel like I say the same thing, right? Enjoy it, have fun, collect what you love, yada yada. That's all awesome, but everybody knows that. I think today, with the coronavirus thing going on, you know, I really think the advice is just don't take the hobby and yourself so freaking seriously if you get into it, right? Serious, right?
Very true.
There are bigger problems in the world. We've got this, you know, virus running rampant. It should be reminding us all there are much bigger things to care about than whether you own a certain card or somebody beat you to the punch and got a card you wanted, or they're ahead of you in the registry, or all that crap, right, that you see and hear out there in the hobby. I hope, you know, new collectors, I kind of hope the current situation gives new collectors you know, a different perspective, right? Just enjoy the hobby. I don't know who said it first, but somebody said it, and I love it. The idea that really, you know, these are pieces of cardboard with a face on them, right? That's not really what the hobby's about. The hobby's about the people and the relationships and the camaraderie and the ability to share and talk and enjoy things. Get away from all that stuff like coronavirus. And so I would just encourage new collectors, don't get hung up in all the stuff that makes the hobby stressful. It's supposed to be a hobby. It's supposed to be fun. Don't take it so seriously, right? And don't take yourself so seriously. And if you lose out on a card, big deal. There'll be another one, right? It might take a decade, right? But it'll come back around. You'll get a chance to get the, Pottsville Maroons postcards if you want them. And you wait long enough, and you're patient, and you keep looking. So I guess that's my advice today is.
I agree with you 110% because it's just, some people view it as like a second job, and for what reason is you're supposed to have fun with it. I'll tell you, being home, I've been pulling out old media guides and old programs and looking at them again, and I got to kind of get motivated to sort some stuff. But by the time I get home, and with my regular job being very stressful right now because of all the problems, I just want to relax and just look at stuff and chill out, and that's it. And I agree with you 100%. Now we're down to a minute. A real quick announcement, as I mentioned before. The next issue of Gridiron Greats is supposed to be out between April 9th. I'm going to keep you posted on our website, given the conditions here in Connecticut and my printer probably being shut down because of the directive. So I'll let people know. Hopefully it'll clean up and people will be back to work and business will be open. Jeff, we're almost out of time. Thank you so much for filling in tonight. Great talking to you. Love your collection. I love your wine cellar too. At the same time, I got to see it there, and I thoroughly enjoy talking to you. You are the hobby. Gridiron Greats, the podcast. Thanks for listening. We'll be back hopefully next week with another show. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. It was fun.
Hey there, sports history fan. This is Arnie Chapman, a.k.a. the Football History Dude, and I wanted to thank you for stopping by to listen to another episode here on the Sports History Network. Our podcasters are passionate about uncovering and sharing sports stories from yesteryear. And if you didn't know it already, we have over 30 shows across the network covering all sorts of sports history topics. In fact, here's a glimpse into one of our awesome podcasts here on the network.
Each week, the official Football Learning Academy podcast will take you deep into the history of pro football through interviews with players, coaches, or administrators in the NFL, as well as interviews with Pro Football Hall of Fame selectors, authors, and historians. You'll learn how the game evolved and important moments that shaped the sport into what it is today. And don't miss the Pro Football History Nugget of the Week. Listen to the official Football Learning Academy podcast on the Sports History Network.
How about that? I bet you're super hyped to go listen to that new podcast, right? Well, to learn about this show and all the other podcasts on the network, head over to sportshistorynetwork.com/podcast. Again, that's sportshistorynetwork.com/podcast. Head over there today to find your next favorite sports history podcast.